Hello and welcome to another edition of the Rest is Policing podcast. My name is Martin Buhagiar. I'm joined by Lee Broadbent. Hi Lee, how are you?
Hi, mate. I'm good, thank you. I hope you're keeping well. It's been a while.
I am very well, thank you. It has been a while, so we're going to start with an apology for being away for so long and going missing. But there was a good cause for that. We've been very busy behind the scenes, and I'm hopeful that we're not hopeful. We know that very soon officers will start to see what we've been working on. But perhaps Lee, we could start with you, just sort of outlining some of the work that that's been going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes time, and we have been plugging away behind the scenes to make sure that we're getting things right and in place. Not only that, we've been liaising with our legal team in terms of reviewing the Home Office response to our pre-action protocol letter. We've reviewed the PFEW's response as an interested party, which is more than interesting, and I think we'll do a separate podcast on that in itself as we go forward. And then we've been looking at in terms of, where are we in our challenge? Has it changed? Has anything changed or moved following their responses? And where do we go from there? So yeah, been quite busy. Nice summer break, bit of a holiday, and straight back right through into it. So yeah, good.
Good for you. I didn't get away this summer because my middle child, was going to university, and I had to make sure he was dispatched and taken down to that
Sounds like he was
17
beheaded, not going to university.
17 journeys backwards and forwards. But I am going away next week.
Oh, good.
So there we go. And one of the things that I was busy with in the middle of this, as well as writing a Policing Insight article, which was well received. It was interesting to write that. I enjoyed writing that, just in terms of the breaking the monopoly campaign, what it is, why it's needed, why now, what the future could hold, and we got some really good feedback on that, didn't we? But I suppose we could touch on some of the points within that article.
So yeah, the feedback was quite good, not only in terms of the public feedback, in terms of our general audience, but it was quite interesting to see what the Federation had to say behind the scenes as well, and the different wrangling that went on there. Obviously, they weren't particularly happy with some of the things that I said, but they're all factual. I stand by what I said. I can evidence it at any point, and so yeah, it was good to get it out there and off my chest.
Yeah, and I can evidence everything I said as well, which was quite good. It
It's
was
always
nice.
the best way forward in media, isn't it?
Absolutely, you've got to do your research for your articles.
Yeah, and you've got to keep your receipts.
Absolutely, and I'm experienced in that field, so I was quite pleased to be able to, when the toing and froing started, to be able to put our case forward. I think what was interesting as well was just how many people just came forward personally and on social media, but just contacting people on phones as well to say, we're really pleased you're doing this. This is badly needed. We want to see the monopoly broken on police representation, and we need a rival to the Police Federation. That was the overwhelming feedback.
Yeah, it's similar feedback to myself, and it was good out engaging in those conversations, because it can be a bit lonely at the top at times, and you're taking an idea forward, and you think, well, as I mentioned during the article that we did, sometimes you catch yourself and you have to take stock and reflections to say, well, what is my motivation for this? Am I doing this for the right reasons? And it turns out, as I was correct all along, we are doing this for the right reasons, and there is a good solid support out there. Sometimes it's silent support, albeit you'll get the encouraging message that's sent privately. Sometimes it's very good public support in saying why the monopoly needs to be broken. And I agree with people. There is an urgent need to change the system of police representation. It is broken. It has been broken for a long time. And it's officers who are losing out as a result of this. Monopolies, wherever they form, tend to be bad, not only for general business, but for the people at the end of the monopoly, who generally are the ones that suffer either via lack of representation or poor representation and service, or the fact that the monopoly turns around and starts victimising them.
Absolutely. And I think as well as that, we won't go into too much detail on this, but we had a meeting, didn't we, where we met with other interested parties in terms of potential campaigners and people like us, volunteers. And like you say, it can be quite lonely sometimes, a lonely furrow. But it was nice to meet other people who want to move this campaign forward. And it does feel like momentum's building now. And I know you've had other meetings, sort of legal meetings, with those. So it does feel like we've got a bit of a head of steam at the moment, doesn't it?
Oh, massively. Massively. And I think it's important to hold on to what the end result of all this is. Yes, the idea is to create the space for conversation around breaking the monopoly, around introducing other elements to police representation. So there isn't just one voice, one organisation, and one monopoly on who gets to speak for police officers, because nobody can be confined to one single avenue of way of thinking. And so when we got those people together and we sat down in a room, not only was it really encouraging to hear their views on it, but even more their ideas on how we can bring this momentum forward. And like I say, the end result in terms of the legal objective might be to create a decision that says police officers can now form and join their own associations, unions, but there's a whole host of negotiations to go through just before we get to that stage. It might be a headache for government, to create, or allow the space to create multiple unions. So why don't we look at creating one new association which brings together any other associations in a power sharing exercise to ensure that everybody gets a voice or is heard at the table, and it just breaks away from what we've got at the minute, which is one voice, one choice, and one stale body of representation.
And so what's the latest then with you? Because obviously I met with you in London with a few others, and then I know you had some meetings with Lee Day afterwards. So what can you share in terms of where we stand at the moment and what the next steps are?
Well, yeah, we met with Lee Day on the 8th of October, and that was a meeting between myself, other interested parties, council in terms of our QC and our assisting barrister, and the legal team at Lee Day. And in that, we reviewed our pre-action protocol letter, which was sent to government, and the government's response to that. Not only that, as part of our pre-action protocol, we identified that the Police Federation of England and Wales, Police Federation of Scotland, Northern Ireland, British Transport Police, Civil Nuclear Defence Police, etc., all might be interested parties, given that any change in the legislation could impact on them. And so PFEW responded. I'll be kind, I'll just leave it. But PFEW responded, and we worked through their response as well, which was amusing, interesting, whole new podcast, which I'm sure we'll pick up. But yeah, nothing which was contained within either response has generally moved our position. Our council are still of the opinion that there is an arguable case, that the prospects of success remain the same, that it is with merit, and so therefore it's meritorious, as they would say, and we are still committed to taking a claim forward. We then discuss the next steps, and the next steps in terms of the review is the permission stage. So in order to bring a judicial review, we have to seek permission from the court to bring the judicial review, and in that point, we have to argue or show that there is an arguable error in law which needs examining by the court. We believe that the case is so clear and there's such an obvious breach of Article 11 human rights here that the claim is arguable. So we think that we will pass the permission stage. And once we pass permission stage, we go to the post-permission stage, which involves exchanging of further arguments between the legal teams, the hearing within the court, and then obviously the court's adjudication, and that could take around a year.
Wow. And what's also nice, I think, is since we last met, and this was happening at the time, but there have been some politicians, haven't there, who've spoken up and in support of our campaign and also raised the concerns that many have. They've also raised in Parliament the concerns that many have over the police federation. So it does feel like, we spoke once, didn't we, of sort of almost pushing, could we potentially be pushing on an open door? That might not be the case, but there's still, and we may well have to go down the road of judicial review, but there does seem to be a group of politicians who are supportive of what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's evident. Big thank you to Jonathan Hinder MP. He did a sterling job in raising the not only the visibility of our campaign and claim in the House of Parliament, but raising the question as to officer representation and whether it's working and what the Home Office will do. We had support from PCC, who again questioned the suitability of a one monopoly system on police representation and whether that is in and not only the officers' interest, but the wider public interest in terms of moving policing forward, especially at a time when we're seeing sweeping changes across policing, reforms, terms and conditions, procurement, you name it. who's representing police officers right now. So yeah, some really good support. And privately, I've got to say privately, I'm not going to name drop anybody or embarrass people, but privately, police chiefs are talking, and police chiefs are talking to us and to people that are now aligning to us in terms of the concerns they hold in relation to PFEW. Notably, PFEW have gone on a what's the word I'm looking for? A Hearts and Mind campaign, and seem to be pumping out all kinds of gaslighting material, and they're trying to erase their poor history. That's to be expected. We'd hope officers will open their eyes and see that for what it is. But yeah, we're generally getting some good momentum and some good forward progression in terms of change.
One thing to perhaps mention at this point, just to be a bit topical, in terms of the police federation and their stance. I know we saw the campaign, didn't we, about the campaign in terms of recording suicides, when officers sadly take their own life, and no one would ever criticise that campaign. You know, it makes sound sense. But on the back of that, then we had the Panorama program, didn't we? And you said article then, but the program. And there was the PFEW response to that, which I guess it didn't, for me, it didn't really tally with the previous campaign that you just mentioned. In that you've got, I'm not saying that would happen, but you've got officers where they are being put through the mill in terms of the mental health. You know, they're being put under massive pressure. I felt, and I know a lot of other people did, that this terminology used in the statement sent out by the PFEW spokesperson was an interesting one. And I saw, there were people that were critical of it. So a lot of people were critical of it, but I guess it
All
just
right, so
absolutely. But I guess it shines a light on what we're trying to do, doesn't it? That how dangerous it can be in these sort of circumstances when you just have one voice for police representation. Because I think many feel that was the wrong response. They didn't really need to release a statement. They didn't really need to go out and speak. A lot of the time, certainly when I was at the police federation, if a police officer had committed misconduct and you felt they had, you say, well, we're here to support police officers rank and file, and it's important that their case is heard in the right way. So we're not going to preempt anything by speaking out early. It does seem like that this was a real change in that sort of thinking.
yeah, I need to temper my anger, to so to speak, because I was contacted by a few people. I'd say a few people, quite a lot of people in relation to that. And as you said, you can read the room across social media and to find out that the membership were very displeased. I think PFEW are scrambling to be a relevant voice, and I think the statement they put out tried to, I don't know, grab some sort of validity or some sort of, hey, look at us, completely forgetting that, in fact, their role is to remain impartial and to support their members, whether those are the members that are subject to a complaint or whether those are the members that are making the complaint. It's not the role of the PFEW to predetermine any outcome or predetermine any support based on a snippet of information through a heavily edited TV piece, which we all knew was going to be bad. And there's no shying away from it. There were elements of that Panorama documentary which were inherently damaging to policing and damaging to police officers. But just as I wrote in the Carrick blog, straight after Carrick was convicted, everybody deserves some form of representation and defence, even if that representation and defence is only to say, we are going to help you exit smoothly from the organisation. We don't think that you've got a defence to this. But what we do think is that you deserve to be treated fairly, compassionately. There should be merit given to your previous service, which may be unblemished and, include awards, rewards, commendations, etc. These things do matter. We need to look at what's happened to get you to this stage. Is this just a failing of your character, or is this a failing of organisational culture, leadership character, leadership context? What's happened here? And then we'll ensure that these mitigations are put forward, and then ensure that if there is a decision arrived upon, which arrives at gross misconduct and requires you to be removed from the organisation, that it's done in line with regulations. But what hope or chance do those officers at the centre of this media furore have of expecting that any staff association that comes out with a statement so blatantly one-sided as that was, what hope do they have that they are going to be treated with fairness, dignity, respect, understanding, you've essentially just thrown them to the wolves in order to show some sort of self-relevance.
They really were, because I was trying to think if I was when I was there when things like this happened, what would my and I'd always think my first question would be like context. What questions were asked over what period of time? Can we have access to the full footage? And the other side, isn't it? People have said this to me. A lot of people have said if you record a lot of people over 6 months, particularly at a certain age, when people are trying to fit into to work. I'm not condoning what was said. A lot, I had a guy who spoke to me he worked, well, I won't say where he worked, but it wasn't police force, but he said he worked at his previous employment, and in the 90s, early noughties, is a very, very, very difficult atmosphere to work in. So when he was around certain people, he would almost become a different person and say things he didn't necessarily agree with because he wanted to fit in. And I think, as we say, if there's poor leadership in these places and bad apples are being allowed to rule the roost, it's not inconceivable that some people will come in and will respond to that. So
Yeah.
they get people who perhaps don't believe what they're saying, and if they're asked leading questions, which is the toughest community to police, what it is, they'll give you an answer they think is in keeping with what the head honcho, if you like, would say for a laugh, maybe for a giggle. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's context. It's context is key.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it speaks to what Graham Golden and what we've previously discussed with Graham Golden always attests to in terms of that organisational culture and how that culture shapes individuals to either submit to a hierarchical wrong culture or actually creates a culture where challenge is open, challenge is free, and it's done from a basis of radical candour where it's given bluntly, but from the basis that the advice or the criticism is being delivered because we care deeply about you. We don't want to see you fail. And it's like, I don't like the rotten arrow, rotten barrel analogy. I think it speaks too plainly, and it allows us to scapegoat individuals or departments at the behest of what might be a rotten orchard. Oh, if it's the air quality around you, if you plant a load of apple trees in the middle of a motorway, are they going to thrive? Given the pollution, the noise, the disruption, and everything else. And it's the same within policing. You've got to take a more deep dive into what is prompting all this behaviour. And it's not just individual behaviour, it's how in terms of the panorama stuff, it's how it manifests in other things as well, in terms of internal interactions, key male dominance, what happens in a custody suite when you overshare along that kind of line. It's having the right culture in place, which examines the systemic element of things, how leadership sets a tone and how that tone is then adopted by everybody. That's what needs to be looked at in a bit more detail, because what we've got at the minute is a very punitive system. If we've got to the point, as is being mentioned, I can't remember where it was, it might have been at the MPAC meeting, but it was mentioned, if we've got to the point where our own employer is having to deploy covert resources into police stations in order to try and catch people behaving badly, we've got something badly, badly wrong. Yeah. And that's not going to do anything for organisational trust, officer confidence, tension issues, morale. It's absolutely deplorable. Surely we should be looking at how have we got to this position? What has gone wrong in our organisation, in our tone, our messaging, our interaction with each other, our support, our welfare mechanisms that is leading into this and breaking so many people? You can guarantee that sergeant or those officers never joined the police in order to be developed into the characters that they may have developed into. They generally join to want to help people. They've been placed in a system which is inherently broken, as very, very numerous reviews have shown. And then once we've broken them or broken down a culture or their sort of, that's what I'm trying to say is, when you join the police, you inherently join to help people. You inherently join because you've got the qualities that policing looks for. And they've applied, they've gone through the process, they've gone through vetting, that's identified at the suitable candidates. And all of a sudden they're thrust into this environment which breaks them. And we never question the environment or the culture which breaks people. We always question the individual. I think we just need to turn the balance a little bit.
No, completely right. That for us is another reason for wanting to break the monopoly, just so there are more voices in this kind of arena when things like this happen. So in terms of next steps, what happens now? Because we're about to potentially launch a judicial review against the Home Office. We need funding to do that. What do we need people who are supportive of our movement to do? How can they help?
So I think the first thing to say is over the next week and a half to 2 weeks, there's definitely going to be a change in the way we are presenting. We'll be tweaking the crowdfunding page to include some of the relevant information that's happened over the interim period. And we'll be changing the way that we're messaging and the frequency of messaging that we're putting out there, because we're going into full campaign mode. In doing that, we have to recognise that we are asking to raise a lot of money. The reason the target is set at £150,000 from this point onwards is because this whole challenge balances on our ability to raise the funds to make it happen. Because doing these things are expensive. Once we've got past the permission stage and we're into the post-permission stage and we're doing all the legal arguments, etc., what we've got to bear in mind is if our arguments fail, we are liable for the other party's costs. And the government have got a wealth of legal departments, expenditure. There's no specific budget that will be allocated to this. It will just be, general legal budget, make this happen, argue our case. Little old us, I, as a litigant in this, I have to go forward and I have to say, look, it's me that's responsible. It's me that's bringing this claim forward. Yes, we are crowdfunding in order to make it happen, but behind it, it's essentially me. And if the claim fails, then I'm liable for costs. So we'll be looking at cost capping orders and things like that and hoping that the government will agree to cost capping orders. And in doing that, I'll have to set out what are my assets, what's my income, my missus's income, what's the availability of any disposable income, etc., and how capable are we, or what's the prospects of raising the actual funds in order to cover these costs. So yeah, there's a risk at play here, but if people believe that this is needed, believe in me to deliver it, then all I would ask is to dig deep, because we are going to need that support. And the quicker we can get to the target, the bigger a message it sends to the government that we mean this. Not only that, it'll allow me to breathe a little bit freely, thinking that they're not going to come after my house if all this.
And that's a very, very important thing, because it's important that it's a campaign, and we, as you say, this has all been voluntary so far, and it will continue to be. But clearly, you can't put yourself and what you have, your personal sort of home life at risk. It's got to be safe for you to move this forward.
Oh, it has to be, yeah. But I mean, I'm willing to do it if there's people behind me. I think Rick Pryor and Richard Cook are in exactly the same position. When you're going up against organisations and institutions that have mass wealth, access to legal teams, and haven't really got a budget that they're going to set aside in order to, it's just go and do it. Especially the Federation, which, let's face it, will be fighting for its existence if another union or rival organisation comes about. They're not going to be concerned with what they're throwing at this, whereas we need to have that concern. Speaking to Rick Pryor and Richard Cook, they have to do similar things in terms of cost orders. That's the thing is, yes, they've managed to crowdfund via the Free Speech Union, but ultimately it's them, their reputation and their financial stake that's in this. So it's a bit of a David and Goliath battle. If people are happy to be walked over, then the people will walk over you all day long. But if you want to take a stand, then sometimes you've got to be the change you want to see.
Absolutely. And so now people can support this, but there might be some who had supported you initially and you've helped them out with the pension challenge, and they may well be getting some good news towards the end of this year. So maybe we can ask for a tenner from those guys.
Yeah, so if people that are watching this that have originally followed us from the pension challenge, you'll have received an email recently which says that the claim in relation to the pension challenge, the one we took against the Home Office, has come to a close. You'll have now hopefully received a second email, which is the claim relating to the PFEW discrimination and victimisation claim, suggesting or saying that the PFEW are on track to make their second payment, and if all goes well, that payment will be received by you by the end of November. You should have an email, and I think that second payment just before quick Christmas, for many people, it works out at about £1,000. So it's a nice little Christmas present and reminder that of what the organisation did to you. I'd equally ask you remember what the organisation did to you, how it made you feel over this past 10 years, and chuck a tenner or even chuck 15 quid into the breaking the monopoly pot, and we'll have more than enough. We'll have our £115,000 based on the amount of claimants that are in the PFEW discrimination challenge. 15 quid is all we're asking for in order to make this challenge happen. And to finish, what needs finishing?
And the thing is, no, I've made this point before. It's potentially history in the making. People can be part of something very special. I remember, as I've said on this before, I remember writing an article when I was at Police Oracle on the history of the Police Federation when it was formed in 1918, and it came about through. So it was fascinating in terms of the background, and I think this is the potential to be even more fascinating. And there is history being made as we speak potentially, and it's so important for people to support it.
Yeah, I mean, I just remind people history has already been made. When we set up the Facebook page back in 2015, that was the first time over 50,000 cops from across the country had gathered in one place, albeit socially, to agree to shape their own futures, to say, well, actually, someone's not standing up for me, so I'm going to stand up for myself. And we won a monumental challenge. Not only that, we went forward and won another monumental challenge against the Police Federation when everyone was telling us that this isn't going to succeed and this is going to fail. So we've made history. This is just about creating now our own destiny. Your voice, your choice, your future. It's our opportunity to really, really solidify something fantastic and start an organisation which has member interests rooted at its heart.
Well, that's fantastic, Lee. Thank you so much, as always, for your insight. It's been an interesting pod. And to our listeners and our viewers, our regulars, apologies for being away for a few weeks. But I'm sure, as mentioned in this podcast, you'll appreciate that we have been busy. And hopefully, as the weeks continue, you'll get to see a bit more of what we've been doing and how we aim to move this campaign forward. So, Lee, thank you so much. And I look forward to our next podcast. We'll talk a bit more about that PFEW response.
Oh, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, look, great to see you, mate. Take care, and we'll see everyone soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate. Bye-bye.